like a rite of passage and a venue for benign inter-school competition.
During maneuvers, we used firecrackers to simulate firing. And for artillery, we used the bamboo cannon.
In July 1941, Japan took over southern French Indochina. The US responded sharply, freezing Japanese assets and embargoing all oil to Japan. General MacArthur was placed in command of the USAFE, the US Army forces in the Far East. Reserve officers and men were called to duty, and last-minute training commenced, even as equipment and weapons awaited shipment to the Philippines.
It was para ba yung fun at that time, to be seen, to be counted, to be counted.
On December 8, 1941, Philippine time, Japan launched a surprise attack on the big US naval base at Pearl Harbor. Within 6 hours, Japanese bombs hit Baguio and Davao without warning. The US and the Philippines have been dragged into the World War.
Immediately after the mass, nag-issue ng steel helmet, nag-issue ng yung talagang sagiran talaga.
The Cadet Corps cheered because to us, we thought no more academics, no more school.
The cadet officers of the Cadet Corps were assigned to the 1st Regular Division. And most of us were assigned as commanding officers of frontline infantry companies.
Thousands of volunteers from all walks of life, many without any military training, rushed to enlist to defend their motherland. Some had to be sent home for lack of weapons.
We feel then that it is a duty to do for the country.
I told myself, I was very young then, oh, this is a good experience.
As volunteers filled the recruiting stations, those already in uniform built defensive positions in selected beaches where the Japanese might land. There, MacArthur planned to stop the enemy. The beaches would be the front lines. From the first day of the war, the Phil-American defenders were at a disadvantage. Most of the planes of the USAFE had been demolished by a surprise attack on Clark and Iba fields.
Buildings on Fort Stotzenberg were blown up. It was awful. And then about 10 minutes later, in came the Japanese Zeros, strafing and firing and bombing. It was a catastrophe.
2 days after the first wave of attack, Japanese planes destroyed the US Navy base at Cavite. Filipino and American pilots flying outmoded aircraft heroically tried to challenge the swift and lethal Japanese Air Force. Among the most courageous was Captain Jesus Villamor, whose daring exploits earned him a Distinguished Service Cross. With the Japanese in control of the air and sea, the defense of the Philippines would fall on the shoulders of ordinary foot soldiers, many of whom had no idea of what war was really like.
We were singing the Hail Latte Deo, hail on to the fray, as if we were going to a basketball game.
Many of them didn't even have arms in the beginning. They didn't have uniforms. Many of them didn't have anything but tennis shoes.
We have at the time the Enfield rifles on the model 1917.
Battle-tested and armed with more efficient weapons, the Japanese landed in Apari, Vigan, and Legazpi to seize airfields before arriving en masse in Lingayen Gulf on December 22. Few of these landings were seriously challenged because MacArthur initially thought that they were purely diversionary.
They had anti-tank guns, they had flamethrowers, they had big artillery pieces, they had thousands of foot soldiers. and we were not expecting that.
But after the Japanese had established beachheads and began pushing inland, MacArthur was forced to implement War Plan Orange, an old defensive plan which he had previously discarded. This called for the withdrawal of all USAFET troops in Luzon to the thickly forested Bataan Peninsula. There, together with the heavily fortified island of Corregidor, they could deny any enemy the use of Manila and its strategic harbor. Entrenched in their positions, USAFET troops were simply expected to hold out until reinforcements arrived.
One of the things that General MacArthur never planned for, he planned for the troops. He planned for Filipinos and Filipino scouts, the Philippine Army, and the American forces to come to Bataan. But he did not figure that there would be almost 40,000 civilians that were going to come into Bataan seeking security.
He left enormous quantities of food, ammunition, and medicine up north.
To prevent further civilian casualties and damage to property, Manila was declared an open city and cleared of military personnel. President Manuel Quezon and his family, together with select members of his cabinet, were evacuated to Corregidor. By New Year's Day 1942, all USAFET forces in Luzon were entering Bataan, confident that it would only be a matter of time before reinforcements would come. But the question was, how long could the defenders of Bataan and Corregidor hold out? On January 2, 1942, the Japanese occupied Manila. General Masaharu Homa, commander of the Japanese 14th Army, had been given 50 days to conquer the Philippines. But Homa knew that as long as the USAFET forces continued to hold Bataan and Corregidor, he could not accomplish his mission. To buy time for an active defense on Bataan, the USAFET forces set up delaying lines on the main road leading to the peninsula. The units manning these lines were tasked to stall the Japanese advance, and they did, in heroic fashion.
We had a Major Donovan, and he found a way to get rid of them. He circled the sugarcane field and set it on fire, and the Japanese came out of there in a hurry. And it was a sort of a duck shoot at that point in time.
Despite being tired from combat and a long withdrawal, the 21st Division in Pora and the 71st Division in Laya